Hello, and welcome back to Owens Bay. We're just going to take a quick little flyby of last week's work. Everything you see on the south side of Raven's Run. Now, all this area had to be rebuilt because of a bug, so you might notice a few items here that weren't there last week. I will get into that during the course of the episode. We're going to take a quick little peek at the area we're going to be working on over the next few episodes. Not this one, but we're going to be building out the town site below here. This is going to probably be the industrial area for that town. But what we're really focused on today is the north side of Raven's Run, the area we're going to be flying over right now. A lot more custom work went into this area than I was anticipating. It was a lot of fun to do, but a lot of work, and I have to admit it turned out really good, and I'm excited to show it off. My name is Geifs, and let's get started. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick little recap over the work done last week, simply because I had that bug I was talking about in the last episode, and it pretty much ruined, I lost the work I did last week, so I had to recreate it. It's more or less the same, but there are a few, differences here and there. There's a little village on this side of the river now, which wasn't there last week. And yeah, everything had to be rebuilt. The biggest project was probably this creek in here. In the rebuild, I did not use real water. It's a dry creek bed, and the lower half of the creek is essentially just lowered to allow the main river to flood into it. So not a functioning creek, but still looks quite nice. I like the way in the remake it cuts a little more into the hillside here. You can sort of see it down below there. That's kind of a nice little feature on the landscape. Not terribly noticeable, but when you see it, it looks quite nice, I think. Nothing too exciting about the creek. You've seen me do these over the last few episodes. Essentially, it's the same procedure for that. Now, this little village, I wasn't planning on making this. It felt like the south side needed a little more life to it than what it had, and we did need a little more residential up in this area, although this doesn't really provide a huge amount of residential. I still have issues with taxis all over the region. The patch just came out. I haven't had a chance to play with it too much. I'm hoping the patch might have helped with some of that a bit. I'll have to try it out and see. Just looking at some of the rural residential areas I built up here, basically stripping away all the props from the houses and just leaving their yards. It looks more suitable for this kind of build. And we have a couple little shops down here. Nothing too much, just enough to give them the basics they need, and a couple bits of industry. Now this pristine pavement here is going to start bothering me, so I'm going to do a bit of detailing just to kind of rough it up a little bit. In last week's episode, I did put out a request for a few names for these small villages. Chris SD came up with a couple of nice names. The one that kind of grabbed my attention was Cedar Creek. Why it grabbed my attention was this little village happens to be right beside a creek. This village is essentially named after the creek, Cedar Creek. So we have our first officially named body of water on the map so far. And I'm just going to draw in a little district for it. Unfortunately, I'm using Anarchy to do this, and obviously it's not designed to do this properly, so the names just kind of stack on top of each other. It's rather unfortunate, but I don't think there's anything I could do about it. Now on to the first of many custom builds in this episode. What I'm going to be building down here, I don't know the exact name for it. I think a log yard is probably the most appropriate name for it. And essentially what this is a gathering place for logs where it's a gathering place for logs where they essentially get sorted and then, sent off to sawmills to be processed. What I'm doing right now is I am creating a log boom to put out in the river. Now, I've done this before with the paper mill, and I did it in a really inefficient way over there. At the time, I think the Move It mod had just come out and I wasn't very familiar with it, so I had to do extreme terraforming to get this to work. This time though, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to place these out on dry land, use Move It to select all of them, and then move it out over the water and position it accordingly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of these rubble pylons to create essentially ties for the logs. We don't really have anything appropriate. This is probably the closest thing I could find, and to be honest, it looks just fine. And we're just going to lower them a little ways into the waters. So I'm going to use the forestry surface texture to essentially trace out an area where the log yard is going to be situated. And I do apologize, I forget who created this mod. These used to be available in-game for the developer mode, but they disappeared. But somebody found them and brought them back as a mod that we can add to the game. Putting down essentially in a random assortment of piles of logs. Now in game, oh hold on. So I need a building for this industry, and I'm going to use the one of the, I think it's the post office sorting garage or whatever it is, as a dummy building. I don't have to worry about it being attached to the road or anything. I just place it where I want, so that's why I'm going to use it. And I'm just going to use some surface decals to mess up the ground a lot here. In game, we do have log storage yards, but they're extremely pristine, and every log in them is perfectly placed. That's not what these places look like. They are messy and dirty and unorganized, and when you drive by them on the highway, they are just a scar on the landscape. They do not look nice, and the assets we have in game don't reflect that in any way. They don't reflect reality at all. I'm going to have to build quite a few more of these into this map. Our primary industry for this region is logging, so there should be quite a few of these all over the place. I'm going to explore in the future, seeing if I can use just log storage yards. Maybe I can incorporate them in some way. That way it would give these sorts of builds a bit of life. This is just purely decorative. And I'm just using this, I believe these are wood rubble piles to, just random bits of wood all over the place. So there was a question last week about my use of the word decal instead of the word decal, and I did a little hunting around, and yes, it turns out it is a regional accent, and I suppose the question is, which region? Now I'm going to incorporate this office garage, the post office garage, a little better with the landscape here. We're going to use a bunch of decals, going to mess it up, make it look really grubby and dirty. I don't usually go to this much trouble with the decals and the detailing, but for this particular build, it seems very appropriate. I find it kind of funny. I made these rust decals and put them up on the mod store, and I rarely ever use them in my own build. But like I said, I'm not usually too concerned with this level of detailing. It might become more of a thing as I move forward. I find there's kind of this paradox at work here with when you're detailing out a region. The more detail it becomes, the more details you want to add. It's like this virtuous cycle where you can't stop because it's sort of like, it's hard to explain, but at some point you have to balance it out. You can't spend all your time doing this sort of detailing. You will never be able to ever finish anything you start. Now I'm going to include beside it here a rural residential property. My thinking here is a lot of times these sorts of businesses are owner operated, and in a rural setting like this, usually the owner would probably live near or on the same property. So that's what I'm trying to replicate here. Now, this house is obviously way too perfect looking, so we got to delete off all the extra bits. I delete most of the extra bits for most of the rural houses here. Now, the pool didn't seem fitting either, but I couldn't delete it, so I am just going to hide it under a bunch of bushes and trees and pretend it's not there. So during this episode, I plant a lot of trees. I'm not going to show every instance of me planting trees. We'd be here all evening or day, or whenever you happen to be watching this, we'd be here for hours watching me do this. So some of it's going to be edited out. But I'm going to show quite a few examples of it as I'm working. Okay, our next, not exactly a custom build, but I'm going to customize the dairy a little bit. This wasn't my initial location I was planning to place the dairy. I was going to place it in another rural area on the map, but the longer I'm building on this map, the more likely the other rural area is going to become suburban sprawl. So I'm going to place it over here where it's not going to be disturbed again. To just expand the cattle yard a little bit to make it a little more appropriate. This is a dairy, so most of these unfortunate cows are going to spend most of their lives inside that cattle shed, and very few of them are going to be outside in the yard here. Also, because there's going to be so many cows in such a small space, this is going to be extremely muddy and dirty. It's not like a nice clean pasture by any stretch. This is going to be kind of grimy. I don't think I made it grimy enough, to be honest. One thing I was thinking about doing here is with the signature businesses, I've been doing this with other businesses, but I think it's appropriate, especially for the signature businesses, is I'd like to create custom businesses for these. What I'm looking for the dairy is I want a name for the dairy. And what I will do is if I get any suggestions for names, if I think one is good, I will take it and I will generate a custom business logo for the company. And I think we might even do a little ad campaign for billboards and posters around the city for the dairy. So if anybody's interested and you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. Anything from serious to humorous is fine. If you do go the humorous route, I like subtle and clever. I added a little extra parking here, but to be honest, how much parking does a dairy actually need? I'm not sure. This might be too much. Now I'm just going to delete some of these extra bits off that I don't want and replace them with my own bits. Essentially what I'm doing here is integrating this dairy into my landscape rather than just making do with what the game offered. This makes it look much more part of my region and a little more unique. Get a really nice view of this dairy from the highway here. The highway is basically above it, so it's excellent view of it. All those taxis, oh my god. Taxis on the back road, which is really annoying me. They should not be there. I really don't want to have to make another gated community just to keep them out of here. But like I said, the patch I think has addressed some of this, so I'll have to wait and see how they behave now. Now I'm putting a little dry creek bed up above the dairy here, and this is just essentially going to terminate at the highway. The idea being that it will just disappear underground and dump directly into the river. This is like, I'm treating this as like a seasonal creek, so this would most likely be bone dry during the summer months. Now I spent a bit of time making a few custom farms along this side of the river. The texture that comes with game for farms is so uninteresting, so I spent a lot of time trying to make it look a little different, a little more interesting. And I pretty much squeeze in rural residential properties wherever I can. These are people who work on these farms or own these farms, so they're perfectly okay with being next to places where land use is slightly noisy or maybe even slightly smelly. Of course, I don't know how the game would handle it. Probably the game doesn't handle it that way, but that's how it would be in the real world. Sorry about the blinding white screen. Somehow the whiteness toggle got reset at some point and I didn't really think about it until after I recorded. So I go to a lot of trouble to plant in plants here to essentially look like some sort of crop. I'm not sure exactly what, but I just wanted to look like, a dense planting. Unfortunately, this doesn't really work. The problem with this is what happens is once I'm finished, at the wrong angle, you get this really strange interference pattern when you're really close to it. And when you're very far away, it just completely vanishes from sight altogether. So you can sort of see the interference pattern right there. That doesn't look right. There is a really good shot of it in the cinematics at the end. I just haven't got the angle correct and it looks really, really nice, but I don't think I would repeat it. I think I'll have to figure out a different way to represent that sort of farm in the future. And more taxis. So many taxis. Look, there's another one. And I spend a great deal of time deleting extra bits off houses and businesses and stuff. And I don't show all of it. Once again, I mean, how many times does anyone really want to watch me do this? So I spend quite a lot of time making all these very irregular shaped yards. Probably most of these places wouldn't have yards so irregular, but it just visually looks a little more interesting, especially from distance. Okay, now here, I was thinking Raven's Peak needed some sort of something unique that made the town, like a known place in the region. So I thought, what a small town in this sort of area really needs is a craft brewery. What I'm doing here is I'm using the clinic from the elementary school and the hearse garages from the crematorium, and I'm just splicing them together to make this odd-shaped building. I was just trying to make something unique looking, and this works quite well. And there's these farm tanks. You can see it sitting off there on the left. These, are probably the closest thing we have in game to the types of tanks you'd find in a distillery. They should be probably stainless steel, not this dull colored metal, whatever this is, but I don't think there is a stainless steel surface for these. So I just make do with what I have here. Once again, this is another business I think deserves a custom business name. So I'm open suggestions for the brewery as well. And once again, I will create a logo for it. And I think this also would be deserving of an ad campaign for advertisements throughout the entire region. So if you have an idea for a brewery name, I am all ears. if I don't get a name from anybody, I'm thinking it's Raven's Peak. Probably the brand name would be Raven or something, but I don't need to use that. And I am kind of interested to hear names other people come up with. It gets kind of tiring to try to think of names for everything in the game sometimes, or at least for what I'm doing. Now, this probably isn't like perfect. I mean, I just did a quick image search online for breweries, and I'm just making something up with the assets we have, and it's probably far from perfect, but I think it works quite well. Let's not think too much on how this truck actually got back here. Now, even though I put a parking lot out here, it's not like anybody's actually going to use it. There's no reason for anybody to park out here. So I'm just going to add some prop cars to it to make it look like something's going on. So over here, I got the idea of maybe making a rich person's hobby farm, and I thought I'd use the Rockstar Mansion for the home for it. Particularly complicated. It is essentially just they have a few horses is really the extent of their hobby farm. But I do spend a bit of time detailing it up, make it look nice. It is right beside the highway, so it deserves a little more attention to detail. And I'm just going to make a little koi pond or something back here. Now, I thought ferns around the pond would look really, really nice. Unfortunately, these two shades of green really kind of clash and don't really work well together, but oh well. Going to paint in a little hangout area for the horses. And I'm only going to put down one horse spawner. I think that gives something like 4 horses, I think, which is a perfect number for a little hobby farm. Now, this was just a complete accident. I was planning to do some cleaning up in game. I wasn't even going to record, and in the process I accidentally made this custom mechanics garage. It is the taxi depot garage extension with a 2x2 commercial building attached to it and a 3x2 gas station. I think it looks really good. I'm going to come back a little later and customize it, give it an actual custom name and stuff. So we'll see it again. It's kind of hard to find houses that are appropriate for this kind of rural setting. They should be quite large, but also not extremely expensive. I mean, some of them would be. I mean, some of these rural properties have very large, expensive houses on them, but for the most part, it's just they have a lot of space. So lots of room to build large houses, but not necessarily expensive houses. There isn't really good examples of those in game. USA? This is not the USA. This is Cascadia. Oh my god, do I have to pick those off everywhere I find them? Oh no. I do a bit of this around the map as well, just to add some randomness, make, some... It's nothing, it's just a random field. It doesn't serve any purpose, but, just to break up the visual monotony of the area. And I thought it'd be nice if this house had a little dock on the river. I think the trick to this sort of rural build is to just give things enough space. At a distance, like this distance from the major urban centers, there's plenty of room for everybody to have lots of space around everything. So it's just, give everything a little more room, I think, is probably the main thing to do. Now, I had all these rather awkward small areas that didn't seem large enough to put in actual farms and stuff, so I make a number of decorative farms. Right here, one thing I thought this region desperately needed was a fruit stand. So I'm going to use this barn, and I'm going to embed into it some of these fruit stalls. This would be a seasonal business, right? This would be summer and late summer. The rest of the year, it probably would be closed up. A good technique I've been finding for surfaces is to paint down a base surface using a surface texture. Right here I'm using the oil surface, and then come over top of it with decals to kind of give it a bit more character. That seems to be, I've been finding that's working quite well for me. Now here I'm just playing around with the color. I'm just trying to give it something like a unique appearance. And I make a custom sign for this. It's nothing too fancy. I have a few custom signs. I'm going to add those in towards the end of the episode. And a few dummy cars just to make it look like something's going on down here. So yeah, I make a number of decorative farms throughout the region. This one down here is, I believe, a sheep ranch. These are all, I mean, I wouldn't really call it a ranch. These are all essentially people's hobby farms along in here. They're just very small farming areas where people, you know, every time I do one of these fields, I kind of try out different surfaces and decals to see if there's a combination I haven't thought of yet that might look better than another one. So a lot of times these tend to be sometimes just experiments of surfaces. Sometimes it works, sometimes they don't. This one's not too bad. And I add a few more sheep spawners here. I want there to be a few more of them. Now I was trying to, it becomes rather difficult after a while trying to figure out combinations of things to make something that looks like something growing here. So in this location, I took the sapling birch trees and I think I sunk them 2 meters into the ground. So they look like bushes, like a tall bush of some sort growing out of the field. What it is exactly, I'm not sure. Okay, the name I came up for this mechanics garage here is Sid's Oil and Lube. And I'm using the City's card because it's the same, essentially the same color palette as Sid's garage, so it makes it easier to place the custom business logo on top of it, so it hides it a little better. And I recolor the buildings to match the logo. I do have a question here. This, I think, is quite a unique looking business, and it's fairly easy for me to replicate it anywhere else on the map. So should Sid's Oil and Lube become a chain store for our nation? I'm kind of leaning yes. I think I would like to, it'd be fun to see this in other locations over the map. But then again, it also is kind of fun to have it as a one-off. So I'm kind of undecided about this. And the great thing about this is it actually functions as a business. So people actually show up to it. Although there is no parking for them, but people do walk up to it. Okay, another custom business. So for this little yet to be named village on the other side of the river, I thought it would be fun if they had something like a local business. And I came up with the Donut Den. And the great thing about this, I didn't even have to change the color of the building. It already matched the sign, which was just perfect. But I think after making it, I think the Donut Den is going to become a franchise business within our region. So we're going to see some more of those over the area. For this business here, I thought it would be nice if it had a little outdoor patio, but the ground wasn't going to cooperate. So I'm using some of these prop pillars here to just essentially make a little patio. It's a bit high. We're not going to be looking at this too closely. It's that first step is going to be quite the there's going to be some lawsuits from that one. And I'm using just fence segments here because I can actually, they will snap to this pillar. So essentially railing around the patio. And this isn't fine dining or anything, so just a few picnic tables for benches. I really like this road edge. It's perfect, but I think we need a better way for it to interact with the surrounding landscape. There's a hierarchy to the decals, and sometimes they switch the hierarchy and then things look wrong. But I really do like the effect. And I'm just spending a bit of time here adding some custom surfaces and decals just to make this a little more visually interesting. I don't go to the trouble of making any of these real parking lots. The density is so low down here that I don't really think it's necessary. The parking that comes with the businesses is probably more than sufficient. So I'm just making some fake parking lots. there's our little village, unnamed village. On the other side of the highway, I didn't do as much detailing as I thought I was going to do. I just forgot. Sometimes when detailing up a large area like this, unfortunately, sometimes you just forget certain places exist and you don't get to them. I can say, though, that this motel is, since the patch, is now a functional motel. Although I imagine the business here is probably very awful. I have to consider putting in some features that might draw tourists to this area, I think. That's for the future, though. Here's our custom fruit sign. And that's it for this episode. We're just going to do the finishing touch here. We're going to give a welcome sign to the city of village of, or town of Ravens Peak. This has been quite the build. Far more work went into this than I was anticipating when I started, like, I think 6 episodes ago now. Oh my god. Anyway. I think this is probably some of my best work to date in City Skylines 2. Interested to see what I build next. I have a few ideas, and we got to get back to the main city. There's some problems in there I need to deal with, but a lot of work to do. Anyway, if you stuck around to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. If you found anything of interest, please feel free to like and subscribe. It would really help out the channel and help me make more videos. Until next time, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.